Attention startup leaders. Are you strapped for time but hungry for strategic insights? Introducing Managed Chaos, your go-to podcast for navigating the startup world in less time than your morning commute. Join us as we share expert advice, real-world examples, and actionable strategies to help you scale your business, allocate resources effectively, and achieve visionary results. Tune into Managed Chaos and join a community of like-minded innovators on the path to entrepreneurial success.
Change is the only constant in life, and it seems to be coming faster and more furious. Today, we are going to be talking about practical strategies to help you manage chaos during organizational change and why this is key to any growing startup. Welcome to Manage Chaos, the podcast for startups, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Rachel Anderson.
And I'm Katrina Purcell.
And we're getting down to business. So let's dive in. Katrina, what does change management even mean?
This is one of my favorite topics, which it probably makes me not very fun at dinner parties. So change management is actually how you help people deal with change. So we know that change exists. We've all gone through changes. We've moved out of our parents' houses. We've gotten to college, or we've gotten to move into a new apartment, and we've had to deal with change. In the business world, this happens on a scale that is so much larger because it's not only one person dealing with the change. You're leading your entire team, whether your startup has 5 people, 20 people, everyone has to be coached through that change. And I think that's why change management is so important and so key. And one of my favorite quotes is, change is hardest at the beginning, messiest in the middle, and best at the end.
Yeah.
You cannot get the benefits of the change without putting in the work. It's just like a training program. You sign up for the gym, but you don't go, you're not going to get the benefits. So if you put on a big whiteboard that you're going to do a change, but you don't actually go through the work of doing the change and coaching your team to get on board with the change, you're not going to get the benefit of it.
Yeah, it's so true. I learned something when I was going through my change management course that has always made me laugh ever since then. And they go, change would be easy if people were not involved. And it always just makes me laugh. Like, it's so true. It's so true. Change is such a complicated thing because people are people and they value their life consistency, the goals they've set for themselves, their own personal stake and whatever is changing around them. And as leaders, I think sometimes we forget that there's sort of this like, what's in it for me mentality when it comes to all the things that are affected by change. And just to clarify, that phrase isn't necessarily a selfish reflection. It's like more of the natural state. You're worried about your livelihood. You're worried about your own job. You're worried about your own performance. And so really looking at simple changes like, hey, we're going to start a new product, or things that are really complicated, like, hey, we have to make some really hard decisions. And if we want to grow, that might mean moving the entire company to a different location. And so all of that change is so important to exactly what you just said. And so it's such a good conversation that I'm so glad we're having. It's one of my favorites too. So if you talk to me at a dinner party, I would be just delighted by this conversation.
There you go. I think, it's so good that you said, the what's in it for them, because I really think a lot of times as leaders, we forget that we actually see oftentimes a 360-degree view. We have information that the people on our team don't have. And so we're making decisions, and sometimes they don't understand why, because they don't see the P&L. They haven't seen the investor, feedback. They haven't seen some of the things in the market that we've seen. And so a lot of change management is really about understanding and having empathy for the people who need to participate in the change and talking them through why the change is happening at a level they understand based on their role. And then also how they're going to be helped and coached through that change. And so that you're not just making a change and leaving them sort of languish and figure it out on their own, but that you're actually actively walking them through it and helping them.
I absolutely love what you just said. I have 2 things I want to highlight. First, P&L, can you define it? Industry term. Let's make sure everyone knows.
The corporate buzzword. So profit and loss statement. So this is often something that your CFO, Chief Financial Officer, is putting together for your team. Frequently the majority of your startup staff is not going to see it. It's only going to be probably anyone dealing with finances and then anyone dealing with your investors. And so it's really going to start to suss out your unit economics. It's the way that you're going to know, is your business profitable? Are you burning cash? And where are you burning cash?
Perfect. Thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight from what you said is this entire concept of empathy. I think that that is such an underrated, important part of change management, and a great segue for my next question for you, which is, as a leader, a lot of leaders are frankly not so into change. And, from an outside perspective, it always surprises me because change is the only constant thing. So, you have to have a plan for how to change, but a lot of people really hate it. And a lot of people are really adverse to that. So, managers or leaders, executives often will hand that out to other people to deal with that change for them. So can you talk a little bit about what do you do if you have a leader that just wants to farm that out, or if you yourself are a leader that you're like, I don't have the skills it takes to be good at change?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because I think oftentimes we look to the leader of our organization for how to react to something. And so the most important thing is that even if you yourself can't deal with change or aren't good at dealing with change, you need to put on a very brave face for your team that you're supportive of the change and that you're backing them and that you're backing the team that's actually implementing the change. Or else you're at risk of the organization saying, well, actually, it seemed like our leader's not very supportive, so I don't need to buy into this. I'm not going to go to the training, or I'm not going to put any effort into learning this new process because it'll probably be gone in 3 months because the leader's not backing it. And the thing that comes down to it is really that's an interpersonal thing for yourself on dealing with general change. I do think leading through change is a bit different than dealing with change on your own. It's very possible that you could actually be very good at leading others through change and not good at dealing with change on your own.
How often have you seen that? I've seen that so much.
I've seen that very often. I think there's oftentimes those of us control freaks in the world, if we're the one controlling the change that's happening, we're fine with it. But if someone else is controlling it, you better watch out. And so I think a lot of it comes down to that interpersonal work for yourself too, of, okay, how do I deal with change? How do I manifest that when I'm talking to my team? Am I using positive verbiage? Am I saying things in a way that makes them feel comfortable? Am I giving them sort of the nitty-gritty of why I think this is so important and why I'm supportive of it as their leader? And that I'm in the trench with them, that I'm not just saying, hey, go figure this out. Come back to me in 6 months and show me that it worked. I'm saying, let's have milestones, let's have check-ins, let's talk to the people on the team and have maybe more frequent check-ins with people we know who have trouble with change, but because they're the change agents, they're the people who really, if they get on board, everyone's going to say, oh, Mary in accounting got on board. She doesn't get on board with anything. So it must be great. And so I think it's a lot about figuring out and really having to understand the personalities on your team, understanding how people communicate and knowing that about yourself and being able to make up for any deficiencies that you might have as a leader in bringing in someone who can help with the change or who can help coach you through coaching others on the change.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. If you're not good with change personally or as a leader, always someone to help you is a good idea. Always. I also think, as you were talking, I was thinking about how many instances I have worked with an executive who wants to postpone a conversation. And that conversation can also look like an email sent out that gives information or discusses the change. They want to procrastinate that because they don't have all the answers. And I think, in my experience, that the lack of information that people have, the more you lose the narrative. So if you don't say what is happening or what is true, even if you don't know it, then other people will fill in the gap for you. And there is another narrative that gets established, which can be more harmful to individuals on your team, let alone the goal itself. And so I would just encourage leaders in these instances to really think about being okay with not having all the answers. and to remember that putting forward information first, even with the acknowledgement that maybe there are things you can't know yet, is a better choice than nothing.
Well, and I think about the entire pandemic when you say that. At the beginning of the pandemic, leaders kind of said, we're all just going to sit at home for 2 weeks. No big deal. Everything's going to be fine. And then it became, these are unprecedented times and we literally have no idea what's going on. And that's okay because the whole world doesn't know what's going on. And so, I think I completely agree with you. And I think it's so important. Again, this goes back to a conversation that we had on another episode around growth mindset and really being able to be humble and understand that by letting your team know that you don't have all the answers, that doesn't mean that you're not a good leader. It doesn't mean that they're going to be concerned about the direction. It means that you're being open and honest with them, especially if you have a small team and you're really requiring them to be all in. You also need to be all in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why do you think change really leads to chaos? I have some ideas based on even just the conversation we've just had, but truly, and in reality, is chaos always leading to change?
So I think this is a really fun one for me because I actually truly love and thrive in chaos. I love to create order out of chaos. It's one of my favorite things to do. I don't know if that's being a firstborn child or, what part of my birth chart, but I think that change leads to chaos in instances where there's an extreme amount of growth. And I think that you can feel that swirl leading up to it because your organization has outgrown something that used to work for it. And if you don't make the change, that chaos will get worse. And so I actually think in general, the chaos is there. And what happens is the change just makes the chaos more prevalent until you're able to actually start to implement what that change is that you're looking to implement. And that's when that chaos starts being managed. But it's a cycle. And so oftentimes I've seen in organizations where you get done implementing one change and you're basically jumping right into the very next change because by changing and growing one process, you've outgrown now 3 other things that were dependent on that process. And so in startup world in particular, being able to deal with that sort of constant chaos, although managed chaos, is so important for the people that you hire. And I've seen this happen countless times where we've brought in someone who has had a great track record, but at a very large company where they were a bit of a cog in a wheel and they had a specific function and they were brilliant at it. And you bring them into the startup environment and they just can't function because, it's not the same. You're building while you're flying the plane. And, in some cases the plane is going down and you're trying to fix it. And, it's really a different mindset. And you have to interview people for that and understand, how well do you handle change? How well do you handle chaos when you're interviewing people for startup life? Because it's true that it's a different mentality. That being said, I worked in corporate for 15 years and then made the switch to startup. So it's not that it can't be done, but it takes a very special type of personality to do it.
Absolutely. That was so well said. I'm impressed right now, or you have impressed upon me right now this one concept, and I'm never going to forget it. This is so good. You said that sometimes, Rachel Anderson paraphrase, sometimes chaos is an indicator of success. Something's going well, and now you have to change to keep up with the thing that's doing so good. And I love that concept because so often we think about change and we think about chaos as a negative thing. And really, there's so often that you could pinpoint a really fantastic reason that now there's chaos. But to your exact point, if it's not managed, it can kind of get out of control. That's so good. Well, thank you so much for the chat today, Katrina. This has been Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. We love this topic about change management, but we'll definitely talk to you soon.
This was another informative episode of Managed Chaos, the podcast for startups. You can find us on all of your favorite podcasting apps, as well as on Instagram and YouTube, where we are at Managed Chaos Podcast. For additional resources or to continue the conversation, you can find Katrina Purcell and Rachel Anderson on LinkedIn.